And then while I was performing, unbeknownst to me, because you don't usually go through an ICD shock after implantation consciously, for people to be like, okay, so that's what it feels like in case that happens to you. It shocked me twice while I was performing.
Hi, and welcome to Let's Talk SADS Live. My name is Heather Cartwright. Today's guest is Hannah Keime, sudden cardiac arrest survivor, patient advocate, social media influencer, and filmmaker. Hannah was 14 years old and her sister Bethany was 17 years old when they were diagnosed with HCM. In 2020, Hannah and Bethany started their nonprofit organization HeartCharged with the mission of ending preventable deaths from undiagnosed heart conditions. HeartCharged has been called Real and Raw by the Journal of Cardiac Failure and provides real pictures made by real patients with the real intent of showing their real lives. Today, we are diving in deep with Hannah to discuss the unplugged life of a young adult with HCM. Hi, Hannah. Welcome to Let's Talk SADS Live. I'm really glad you're here today with me. So tell me about HeartCharged. How did you get it started? Why did you start it?
Hi, no, thank you so much for having us. A little bit about HeartCharge. It was started by me and my older sister, Bethany. We both have the same genetic cardiomyopathy. We started it because we wanted to utilize the power of social media, because it was originally just started as an Instagram account like 5 years ago, to kind of just put on like media that young people can have heart disease and to bring awareness to that more, because we were very grateful. We were, diagnosed and found our things, but we were very sad to find out many kids our age had been undiagnosed, and that led to many, many deaths. And so we wanted to do our part in bringing more awareness to young people having heart disease. And then we kind of grew into a nonprofit. We're based here in the US, but our reach is international. And our mission is to, end preventable deaths from sudden cardiac arrest and undiagnosed heart conditions and offer patient-to-patient support.
Great. Yeah, I've looked at your Instagram pages and I really like what you're doing. You're really relating to young people. Why do you think that's important?
I think it's important because I think when it comes to heart disease, which not to scare anybody, but the reality is it's life or death. And I think not only do, women get more misdiagnosed, but age does play a factor, because we've heard so much, see in media, talked about news. Oh yeah, like you see a cardiologist, like, when you're in your 60s, like that's when you get heart disease because, you're not eating right, you're not doing it. And there's so much that's not talked about, like, hey, cardiomyopathies, hey, you could be born with it. Why aren't we doing more screenings at a younger age, to get on top of it? That there's also the whole thing like, oh, are they really, this is an asymptomatic, condition, when really not, when like we would look back and be like, wait, I was having irregular heartbeats. Oh, I was having chest pain. And so I think it was from us being like for me personally, like I could have so easily not been here. And so what can I do to like bring that awareness? And because there hasn't been enough young people, I think even enough diversity in the awareness of heart disease, of how it affects people, that there isn't, any age on it. The fact that sudden cardiac arrest, which, kills many, many people, can kill anyone at any age. And I think bringing awareness to that, I think that's why it's so important for young people to be invited in this conversation, because we are affected by this. So it does get a little bit, disheartening when you just keep seeing the same kind of like post of old people or that in the media. And when I say old people, like, I don't want to sound ageist, but yeah, like 40s or above. But when you start talking about that, I feel like, oh, am I not part of the conversation? But I'm here taking the same meds as, a 65-year-old man. I feel old too, with heart disease. But I think like changing the face, and that's what we've been trying to do on our Instagram, not only sharing our stories, but other young people's stories, to kind of change that face of heart disease.
Yeah. Your site and the work that you do is been called Real and Raw. why is it important to show partial nudity, you show the bumps and scars, you really get in deep on how it affects the body and your own image of your body and how other people see you. Tell me more about that.
No, yeah, I think like for me, like one of my personal things when we started sharing is like I don't want to just share the positive, side of living with heart disease. Like we're patients, right? And people, I think on social media, there's fakeness, and other stuff is like, is this genuine? Is this? And I think in order patients want, and that's why I think we've really garnered a lot of patients to our pages, because I'm sharing, the good, the bad, the ugly, the in between. And then I think as well, in the sense of like partial nudity, showing my scars and stuff, is I have to show you in order for you to, believe or to see that I do have a heart condition, because it's not as much as an external disease. I have scars hidden. Like I have to kind of show some of that in order to be able to be like, see, I have proof, I do live with heart disease. And so that kind of takes that real and raw, but I think reminding people like, hey, we're patients, at the end of the day, we're going through it. And, if I can be a little bit vulnerable to help you feel a little bit more confident or accepting of it, like, then I will do that, because it's been amazing to kind of be like, hey, yeah, we have posts where we show off our heart monitors. And then we're also having a post where I show off the scars that I got from my heart monitor, because it's, like burned my skin and the adhesive like rubbed it wrong. But I can still be like, hey, I can still feel cute and good, to especially remind like other women and even men that like, don't be afraid of this and you can flaunt it. But of course, it always takes like the first person to kind of step out there and be like, hey guys, like you're not alone. We're here too.
Yeah. How does sharing those personal things and that vulnerability changed your perspective from maybe the time you were diagnosed to now? Is it helped? Is it hindered? What's that experience been like for you?
It's been, it's always nervous to go on the internet, because as like, you'll find obviously other people, and that's the beauty of it, of finding people you would have never connected with without the power of social media. How would I have met people, in India and Scotland? Like I don't live there, I don't go visit as often as I would like go to those places. But for me in my own like patient journey, it's been so helpful in like the selfish way, is I've been able to help in my own journey and learn from other patients of like, hey, I had a really bad reaction to my iron infusion. Oh my gosh, now I have like, I post about it, and then here's all these people giving me tips and stuff. Oh, if you go the next time, hey, make sure you take Benadryl. And so it's been like rewarding in my own way to be able to talk to more people, or, hey, I've been talked about, I might need a heart transplant, and now I'm connected to dozens of people who've had a transplant, and now I can ask them questions of my own journey, as I'm also, sharing about my stuff to help the person who's not at my journey yet. Like I think just in general, the heart community is very supportive, and we want to help in like, hey, I went through this traumatic thing. Let me give you some advice to help. Like, hey, I went through this bad thing so that I could help somebody else have a little bit easier journey. And so for me, I feel like I'm in between of, oh, I'm getting also help too, as I'm also trying to share and talk about that and be, real and raw, to share the patient journey. So it's been very helpful for my own. And it kind of gives you a little bit confidence to be like, okay, I can be vulnerable because it has helped. And hey, do I want to post this? And then seeing the people that post has really hit and been like, hey, thank you so much. I really needed to hear that. Or, oh my gosh, that really, meant a lot of this video. So that's really, it's the community that keeps you going for sure.
Yeah. You were pretty young when you got diagnosed. You were 14. How is dealing with the fact you're living with a life-threatening condition? How has that been? And what would you want to say to your peers who don't have it? I mean, how do you make them understand what this is like?
I know it's hard because it's like, well, like when I was 14, I think grasping that, and I'm still in a sense grasping it, that this is a life-threatening condition. It was a lot to process because, like, with my diagnosis came a huge bunch of no's. You can no longer do what you were doing just a few months ago in sense of like physical activity. And so I'm sitting here, and it's kind of hard because the social aspect of it, again, it's a non-visible condition. Even though if you look, you could probably tell, like, oh, she looks a little bit winded when she takes the stairs. Like, there are some signs, but they're not, great to the natural eye for people to catch on. I think was the most like hardest part is because as I'm still trying to process this condition that is like quite kind of scary, in that sense of like, what does my life look like? I'm still here in my early teens. I want to live a long, good life like anybody. And then people being like, well, I don't understand, like, you look completely fine. And that has been like the hardest part, because then you're like, okay, now I'm explaining and I'm trying to understand. And most people, and like me, like, you get sometimes like just tired of explaining, like, okay, so this is why I can't do it. And then they have a bunch of follow-up questions and you're like, my doctor said, like, I'm still trying to figure out why exactly I can't do this. I know, okay, I don't actually feel that great when I do this, like, trying to explain it. And that's kind of why we've been trying to push so that people, more media for it. And like, I'm a filmmaker, I just made a short film kind of touching on those subjects, is like, so people don't have to do so much explaining, that it is more normal, like, oh yeah, why am I questioning you, right? Like, oh, if you don't want to do that, or oh wow, like, you have this. But I think for me, like, I fully understood how life-threatening, like, yes, my doctor said, like, she was surprised I hadn't already dropped dead by that point of how physical I was. But then when I had, gone into sudden cardiac arrest, like a few years after that, that really hit me. I'm like, oh, no, yeah. Like, this ain't life-threatening. Yeah, this is like, okay, could take it. And that was a whole other thing to sit with and to understand, like, yeah, no, this is scary, but I have the treatments that I need to be able to get through it. But that was a lot to process, for sure.
So you had this experience, and you post this on HeartCharged on the Instagram page of you're performing on stage. Most people's biggest fear of being up on stage is public speaking, but you had something happen to you that probably is the worst fear for people who have, like us, have internal cardiac defibrillators. Tell me about what happened there.
Yeah, so I was performing on stage with one of my high school best friends, and we were doing a lip sync contest. I had just graduated, so like we had done it the year before, and then I was like, oh my gosh, I'll come back, make a little, guest performance. And then while I was performing, unbeknownst to me, because you don't usually go through an ICD shock after implantation consciously, for people to be like, okay, so that's what it feels like in case that happens to you. It shocked me twice while I was performing. The performer, Jean in me, who had been a performer all my life, was like, oh, I got hit really, really hard. I thought it was my friend who had hit me because we hadn't really practiced. And I was like, okay, I've done a dance, I've been hit, and the wind knocked out of me. And you're just like, I got to keep going. It was a competition. I'm in front of like 300 people. Let me keep going. And then I confronted her after and was like, whoa, you hit me like really, really hard, like twice. And she's like, girl, what are you saying? Like, I didn't touch you. And then she's like, well, we have video because people were filming, all in the audience. And then we watched it, and I was like, here, she was here. We weren't even close at all. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I think I was just shocked by my ICD. And then luckily I lived down the street, so I drove home, and then I told my mom, and I was like, I think I was shocked, texted my EP, because that's how unwell I was. So my EP was like, you can have my personal number if something happens for this kind of situation. And then my EP was like, oh my gosh. And I sent her the video. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's what happened, right? And she's like, yes, like, come in immediately. That was a lot in itself of having that happen. I'm kind of glad my mind was somewhere else to not fully process in the moment, because I think if I fully realized, I obviously would have stopped and been like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But what's crazy is nobody in the audience knew what was happening. And yes, I had performed on that stage and, done my own stunts. And I a little bit was like, had that kind of energy anyway. So people didn't even think anything. And then when I told like some of my close friends, they're like, hey, so did you know? I was actually shocked. And then they're like, oh, I guess because it was like, yeah, I guess now you say that it's something that was a little bit off, but like I just kept going. So even, to that audience of people, they had no clue and everybody's filming it, which is just a bizarre sense of its own. But then I decided to use that like, hey, I have these videos, these angles. This is probably the most vulnerable I'll be because I have no control, the ICD shocking me and how my body reacts to that. But as somebody years before who had done presentations and tried to explain like ICDs, there is no video of someone really getting shocked and left like that kind of close up
in the wild.
Yeah. So I was like, you know what, as the filmmaker in me, let me, share it. And then it was actually like amazing how much that helped people when they were shocked or their partner was shocked, that they could be like, oh my gosh, you were shocked by an ICD. And I've even had people be like, if that little girl could get through it, even though I was like 19 at the time, like I know I can get through it and stuff. So it's been like a teaching tool in its sense that, traumatic thing. And I even went back like a few years after that had happened to that stage and done a presentation on that stage and shared that video. And that was like weirdly full circle. Luckily, my IC hasn't shocked me again. But yeah, that was a lot to be like, wow, like if I didn't have this device, like would not be here. And that is a lot to think like my whole life relies on this, device is something to process.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the shocks are hard, but they save our lives. Yeah. So you also had an experience that I heard about was a young woman, probably younger than you, was resisting getting an ICD, but she went on to your Instagram pages and saw the post that you had created with your sister, Bethany. And you tell the story. I mean, how did that, what was the outcome for that?
Yeah, we've had even like, it's crazy, just like even after that story, we've had so many more of like, especially young women finding us. But this young girl, her name is Ava, and it actually was right before we started our Instagram page. Like we were in the works of making it. And me and my sister had obviously shared on our own personal accounts of like, oh, I got my ICD, or hey, this is like my 5th anniversary of being diagnosed with, HCM and whatnot. And this brave girl, Ava, was searching. She just gotten her diagnosis of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, searching a hashtag on social media because that's where young people find our information. We're going online. We're trying to understand, does anybody else have this condition? And she's going and she sees my sister's post about her ICD, and my sister had an SICD at that time. And she's like, hey, like, do you have HCM and do you have like an SICD? My doctors are recommending it. She was like early 20s girl, very active. She also was a dancer like my sister. And she's just like, I'm really worried because I don't know what the device is going to look like. And my doctors aren't providing anything like that. And as much as my doctors are saying, this is a life-saving device. And she was in the condition where she had to travel with an external defibrillator, an AED around. Yeah. So like she needed it. But the thing is, her doctors weren't offering her that fuller picture that obviously we all crave as a patient. Like, okay, you're telling me you're putting it here, but what does that look like? How bulging is it going to look like? I'm a thin girl. Like we already have, body issues usually. So it's just like, that's a lot to accept of that. And also you're telling me as a young person, this isn't a one-time surgery. You're telling me I'm probably going to need to be cutting myself like every 10 or so years. That's a lot to look different when I'm looking at my life than if I'm looking at my life at 50 or 60. And so that story, then my sister like was messaging like, yes, I do. And like, no, like my, the ICD saved my sister's life. Like my SICD hasn't gone off, but like, that's why I know I have it. Like, it's meant so much for our family, but here, let me show you, let me talk with you, like what my thoughts were. And hey, here's a picture of me. And, and that's why we've kind of done like the flaunting it to like show people, hey, this is what it looks like if you want to know what it looks like in a bikini, because girls do want to know that. Hey, if you want to know what bras are better to wear when you have an SICD. And so like my sister talking with her, and then she was able to receive, the life-saving treatment to get an ICD. But it was just showing that like, hey, like now patients want to know more information, but that like we do have questions and we want to see it younger, and we want those, pamphlets or whatever you talk, or us as a resource to show it. And that's been really amazing to help people, understand it, because it is a big thing to accept. You're accepting a device that if it goes off, it also does cause more trauma, like a whole other thing. You're basically saying like your life is in this device's hands, but people do worry how they're going to look, and that's very valid to understand. So that whole story was like, no, we have to keep going with what we're doing. Like there is a power in social media and finding these young people and finding these people who, because she had nobody else in her family who didn't have the condition, who like didn't have a device. So she really had nobody to talk to or to really understand what that would all be. So her story was kind of like, okay, yes, we have to keep going on this. And now to have gone and fully, in the HeartCharged, realm, like met so many more people we've been able to help and understand. Like we get like messages every week of somebody about to go in for their ICD surgery and have questions or, concerns, or they're about to get one and they find us in the hospital and they're like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for giving me some hope and stuff to, go through this journey.
Yeah, no, it's so important. I mean, I was 21 when I was diagnosed, and like you, I looked around, everyone was so much older than me, and they just assumed I was there. If I was there for a clinic visit, I was there visiting my grandfather, or I'm like, no, it's me. I'm here for myself. So one of the things I had to deal with, and I'd love to get your perspective, is dating. I mean, when do you have that conversation with someone that's important to you? You're afraid that you might push them away because it's a pretty heavy thing to introduce. And also sometimes it's not that attractive. Like I've had times where I've been hooked up to a Holter monitor and, you're not necessarily wanting to show that, but have you had experiences with that, or people in your community that you've talked to about that? It's a big topic for your age group.
No way. No, I mean, it is a huge topic for our age group, and there's so much like different realms, because then it's like, okay, if I do find somebody now, children, and I have a genetic cardiomyopathy, so like genetics is a whole other thing too, of like, hey, or do I want to have a child? Oh, my doctor said I couldn't, or yes, we could, but I'm still a heart patient. But in the sense of like, before we even get to all of those, questions in the dating, like for me, it's kind of, for a part, like after high school and like while I was like saving up before I did like a church mission in HeartCharged, I kind of was like, oh, I feel like everybody knows the first thing about me, because I was like such an advocate, because nobody was talking about like heart disease and young people. So I was like, I don't want that to be the first thing people know about me. Mm-hmm. So like I didn't hide it. I mean, it's kind of easy to hide because you're like, da-da-da. But then when I'm not doing, activities, then people are like, oh, why? And they're like, oh, hey, let me explain it to you. But I would still tell people, because it's like, I have scars, I have things like, hey, yes, dating, like, oh, I do have this condition because I'm passionate about it. So it does bleed into my everyday life. And now on HeartCharged, it's kind of hard for me to be like, if I like, oh, what do you do every day? Oh, hey, so I run this nonprofit, or hey, you should follow this account. So like for me, I can't really hide that now in like dating, unless, I catfish, but I'm not, into that. Right. But then with like my sister, because her ICD bulged a bit more, she's had men be like, get like icked about it. Like, like, can I touch it? Like, oh, I don't want to do anything. And like, they kind of baby you, which is like the one thing, like, yes, everybody likes to be like, oh, yeah, but like, I don't know, for me, and I've seen other people, like, I don't like to be like pitied or babied. Like, I want you to just view me as like being, yes, I know I have this life threatening and I'm not trying to scare you, but also like I've lived enough that I do know my own limitations. So do not start adding more to me because you're trying to process it. But again, like I can't control how you react to what I say or do. But like that's been a little bit hard of like, okay, it's one thing to, you know, say I have something and then now you have physical things showing and then people get nervous of like, oh, well, or like, or sometimes it'll be like, oh, like, I can't kiss your, oh, like, you know, like, oh, is your heart rate going to go up? And it's like, okay, boy, let's chill. Like, you wish you were that, you know, depending on the boy, you might be like, wow, I'm having tachycardia. You're super duper hot. But that has not been the case yet. So you're like, you know,
Right.
But then like talking to other, you know, heart patients, because unfortunately I don't have a huge background of, I've dated a lot of people. But that is something that people do come, and then I've talked with like other people, whether it's in the CHD realm of congenital heart disease people or that. But I think when I talk to them and I hear when you do find a partner who's so supportive and is like so loving, is like, oh, we had just been dating for, you know, a month or two and I had to get like a big surgery and he was there for me, and you're like, oh my gosh, wow, love does exist. And the hopeless romantic in me is like, wow, okay, it's out there. Because sometimes you do feel like, wow, like, okay, who is somebody really gonna understand, you know, do they have to have gone through something to get it? And then it's nice to hear that, oh, this person doesn't have heart disease and they can still accept you wholly and fully. And I don't know if there's a right time to tell somebody you have it, because I've talked to many people and it's all been different of like, yeah, like if I don't think it's serious, why, right? Like unload that whole part of me. Right. But then it is, of course, like I hated like when it'd be like, oh, if I'm with somebody or like traveling with only one person or stuff, they'd be like, oh, you should let them know you have a condition in case something happens, right? So they're prepared. So there is that case of like, hey, so let me tell you something. If I do faint, that's okay. You know, if I get shocked, don't worry. Okay, if I start, you know, seizing or convulsing, that's not normal. So please call 911. So there is that talk of like finding that right time of like, hey, you might have to let them know, hey, I do have some issues. Let me lay it out for you. But I think finding it for your own time, I think obviously the sooner the better, because why waste your time and then you find out that person isn't going to, you know, like, totally. Oh, really accept you and like that's somehow an issue for them, is always better, I think, for the least amount of heartbreak in that sense.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And that doesn't change whether you're 25 or 55. I can tell you it's finding good people is tough, but if you find them, hang on to them. So just to wrap up, Hannah, like what would you want to say? You know, we've got a big community, a lot of diverse types of arrhythmias that they're dealing with within the inherited, you know, cardiomyopathy and channel myopathy world. What do you want to share, what you've learned, you and your sister, these last, you know, since your diagnosis, since you were 14, but also particularly in being more or less a public face now, and really out there and authentic? What do you want to share as some final thoughts?
I would just say like, we're here. If you ever want, you know, somebody to talk to, laugh with, you know, even if you don't want to talk about heart disease, if you want to talk about TV and movies, you know, sometimes people, you know, get sick, that, you know, we're here. I think one thing that we always like harp on and like to share that is that your life doesn't end with a diagnosis. Your life definitely does change and it looks a little bit different, but like that's okay. And like you know, we rather see more survivors and we rather see it. And that's why we have our community to help you get through your life, because finding new passions and dreams, you know, does take time, is hard, especially when your life seemed like this and when you're living with, you know, arrhythmic like cardiomyopathies, you know, like you have a lot of limitations on you and what you can do and how you can be active. But that, yeah, like don't let this completely define you, even though, yes, it's a huge part of you. But yeah, and I would just say like, I know it's hard for people to find, but I feel like I've sensed like for me, the gratitudes to still be here. Because like this month will hit 10 years, and to think like I've had 10 additional years on my life, all because I decided, you know, to well, not me, my mom, my aunt decided to share family history. So I think also do that. Like if you have any family, please share your family history, especially in the heart health, because that does save lives to be able to know, hey, and don't be scared. And sometimes it is hard for your family to listen and be like, no, like guys, this is serious, please get, testing. But yeah, that like there's more people out there like you. So yeah, please, find this community. We love what you guys are doing at the Canadian SADS Foundation. So, any way that we can all just help more people and know that you're not alone in this journey. I think that's the biggest gift, is to have like friends who do get it, who can offer you that hope, because this journey is long and scary. And you can always have good friends along it. So yeah, don't feel discouraged with this condition. And it's okay to cry, and it's okay to scream and get mad. Those are all valid things to experience when you're on this journey. So yeah, don't think you have to react a certain way or have this, great positive attitude about this. I mean, obviously it does help sometimes to get through the hard parts, but we're complex human beings with a complex condition. So you can live complexly, like, through.
Thanks, Hannah, so much. I mean, you really bring not only your vulnerability, but you are an inspiration, I think. You're gathering a lot of young people, you're bringing a lot of diversity in, and you're showing really, what the real life is like with these conditions. And I think you and your sister are doing great work. So thank you so much. Keep it up. And we look forward to seeing your short film come out, and then much more content that you and your sister are providing. So thank you very much.
No, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, you've been lovely. So yeah, it's been an absolute delight. Thank you so much.